thoroughly exhausted from the trip and the consistent travel,
Mm-hmm.
but I just need a good rest, and hopefully I'll be able to get one soon.
How do you rest?
Well, I tried to go out to Phoenix,
Uh-huh.
where Mr. Muhammad had a home there that he built um, back in the late 60s,
Mm-hmm.
and we acquired it, and so I use it to go to rest, and then sometimes I go into the Caribbean.
Mm-hmm. What part of the Caribbean?
Well, my mother's home is in St. Kitts,
Uh-huh.
and it's a lovely little island, very quiet, pristine, and nice. And
Mm-hmm.
so there I can be quiet, and not a lot of people
Mm-hmm.
to seek me out, to
Mm-hmm.
ask me to
Mm-hmm.
speak or do this or that. So
Mm-hmm.
I generally can rest there.
Mm-hmm. And in Phoenix, it's is this also isolated in this particular? No.
Not nearly like
Yeah, that's a
the Caribbean,
Caribbean.
but
Yeah.
you know, the believers and the people sort of respect my privacy. They know when I come
Mm-hmm.
to rest, and
Mm-hmm.
so they generally won't call,
Mm-hmm.
or even my staff. They'll
Mm-hmm.
come through
Mm-hmm.
my administrative assistant if they wish,
Mm-hmm.
so I can get some measure
Mm-hmm.
of rest.
Mm-hmm. That sort of what you're saying sort of runs in line what we wanted to talk to you about. This is a piece. It's going to be an interesting package that we're planning for a November issue. Every November we do a men's issue, and there really are. We put so much thought into this November issue. I wish we'd put as much thought into the other 11 women's issues. But in this particular issue, we're going to have about a dozen um, essays of various lengths from men on various aspects of the world, of their world. We're going to be talking about, Andre Harrell, the head of Motown, on power as he sees it. We're talking about Father John Weideman, the author. He's going to be writing about his daughter is a basketball star, so he's going to be writing about that. Just the idea of watching his daughter play basketball, how he feels with it about it. Just different aspects of marriage, love, work. We have a wonderful essay that came in on by a young writer named Touré on what is it? It's on profiling. Is it profiling? It's just I think it's on men and profiling. So we're getting the first person voice from men, just talking about the things that are really close to us from the heart. Now it's not easy getting these guys to open up. Men don't like usually to sort of talk about fear, sadness, what they miss. Really, it's amazing. They'll start off writing about this, and then they'll go and start preaching. That's one of the problems. It's interesting to see some of them come through. What we wanted to talk to you about was Susan had this idea about Farrakhan's warm heart. Susan is just Miss Touchy-Feely, and it was the idea came out of sort of looking at. I'll tell you how it started. We had an idea about Minister Farrakhan as the quote outlaw, and this outlaw, this black men have been the archetype of the outlaw here, and they've been. They are really America's outlaws, and how does it feel to be in that position, always trying to defend yourself, always under attack, and evolved from that theme to this this idea of getting you to talk about things like rest and releasing the stress, fear, sadness, finding solace wherever you find it. We wanted to talk about things you don't really see discussed much in the paper. So I didn't really want to talk about your trip so as much,
No,
only in
she
reference
told
to.
me,
I want to,
but
or the pot. You
that's
have to.
fine. So what,
Mhm.
you should, well, I don't have to tell you your
Mhm.
job. You
Mhm.
know yours.
Yeah. Uh huh.
Just go right ahead
Okay. So I just want to
and
explain what we're
feel
trying to do.
free
Okay.
to ask
Yeah.
the
Mhm.
questions that
Mhm.
will enhance the
Yeah.
idea of the
Mhm.
article,
Uh huh.
and I'll do my best to
Yeah.
answer.
Put this closer. Okay. So that's why I wanted to. I just wanted to explain, what we're trying to do. Um, you have suggested in many interviews and many, we've heard you say that people are misunderstanding you, misinterpret what you say, pull it out of context. We always hear you correcting something that's been said. Well, I didn't say that. Is this a frustration for you? Why do you think this happens?
Well, there is in the dominant society
Mhm.
a fear of any black person who commands respect and influence over large numbers of black persons, and they, meaning the dominant community, do not have control, even in a measure, over that individual. And because of fear, they see this person as a threat. And as a result of that fear, they sometimes and oftentimes intentionally misquote the person whom they fear so that they can create fear in the hearts of the target audience of that person and distrust in the target audience of that person, so that perhaps out of the target audience of that person there might come sufficient opposition to that person to destroy the aim and purpose of that person whom they fear. And so, as it is in the life of the prophets and messengers of God and those who fight for the liberation of an oppressed people, they always have to make clear their own aim and purpose, because the government into which they come and the people among whom they appear are the target of vicious propaganda against that person. So that person has to correct the lies and the distortions so that the people might see that person as he or she really is. And so I'm just one in a long line of persons that have been misquoted and an evil veil thrown over good people so that their own people might disown them, reject them, despise them, and ultimately stand idly by while the government or others assassinate their character or even assassinate them.
Does it bother you?
No, it goes with the job. You cannot accept any gift that God gives you that doesn't have an accompanying responsibility. And if I were in music, as I was, or in athletics, as I was, I cannot accept that gift without accepting the sacrifice that is necessary to perfect that gift, that it might serve uh, the audience and serve the person who has been given the gift. So my gift is speech. That is my greatest gift. A spiritual light that gives me understanding, a quick understanding of the divine Word of God. And as I articulate that word and it frees an oppressed people, then I become a target. And part of that goes with advancing the Word of God. And if we study the history of the prophets and sages and teachers, they have always suffered bitter opposition, but that only proves first the commitment of the individual to the message that he brings. Second, it proves if God is with that individual, then nothing of the opposition is able to uproot that individual or those who believe in and follow him. So it's all part of it, the job.
But never even, I think you mentioned actors or singers. I think the greatest singers in the world, sometimes the criticism can hurt. And I think even the prophets had, moments of, how did they, they got this wrong. Yeah.
Of course.
Can you quote?
We read what our critics write. We, at first, are very hurt by what they write. But after a while, like anything, if I were a boxer, in the gym, you get hit. And you get hit so that you can withstand the punishment that your opponent is going to give you while you deal out your own. So whoever can withstand the greatest becomes the victor.
Was this something that develops over time?
Yes, that's right.
Can you talk about any turning point when you learned to see that this is really...
Oh, sure. As a young minister in the mosque, there was always a question and answer session where the people in the audience would challenge you on what you said. And I would notice, of course, my heart palpitating with fear and apprehension as to whether or not I would be able to handle the question. Sometimes the questioner was hostile, and sometimes they were just seeking information. And luckily for me, I was confined at that time to the mosque.
Where was this now?
In Boston.
In Boston.
And then, at a certain point, I came out of the mosque to do radio talk shows where people would call in and attack your point of view. And I would have trepidation, discomfort. And then even inside the mosque, when believers who in my own inadequacy and in their desperately trying to tolerate me in my inadequacy would challenge me with criticisms. And I didn't take criticism so well in the early days of my ministry.
About what year are we talking about? What
We're
period?
talking about 56, 57, 58, 59, 60. But I had to grow to understand that criticism is not always an enemy. And today, and this is very true, I listen to my critics. And I study their criticisms of me. And in some instances, I learned to have greater respect for these men and women because they sincerely believe that I am this or I am that. And so I try to study the criticisms to see myself from their eyes and look at myself through their eyes and see, am I that person? And if I am, then they will help me to purify.
Can you cite a specific example of this? And an instance where a criticism really helped you grow? You learned from it?
All criticism
Yeah.
helps me to grow.
Yeah.
Some of it is just vicious and malicious. And when I sense that the person is vicious and malicious, well, I take the criticism, but I see the motive of the critic. I have a wonderful critic in Brother Haki Madhubuti, in Brother Salim Muwakil, even in Clarence Page, even in Carl Rowan. You know.
Can you say something that either one? I know Hakeem Abudi, Clarence Page, and Carl Rowan. I don't know the other gentleman who you mentioned, but can
Well,
you give me one?
Haki raised questions that question my character. Can he really be trusted, or does he have some ulterior motives in what he's saying and doing that is vain or personal rather than in the best interest of the masses of our people?
Was this in reference to something specific, some specific incident?
I don't think it's in reference to a specific incident, but the point is that some of those close around me, when we had our convention in Africa, we invited Haki to come.
When was this?
In 1994. And some of those close to me did not want him to come because he had written something critical of me. And I said, and that's all the more reason why I want him to come. Because I felt that he did not know me as well as he could because we had not communicated for years. And we had dinner in Ghana, and I told him that I loved him even more because I knew that as long as there were men like Haki who would critically appraise me and my work from an honest perspective, that I would always be able to correct myself should I be off course. And that's the value of critical analysis coming from persons who are sincere. And Haki is one of the more committed and sincere men that we have among us.
Do you ever feel there is a danger in going off course for you?
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
There always is a danger whenever you are praised by many and loved by many. There is the tendency to become arrogant. There is the tendency to begin to think more of yourself than you should. And so one always has to be pricked with the thorns of one's own shortcomings, that we do not wish for people to worship us because we are but a passing thing, and we are not God, and we are far from perfect. So we want to point the people to the perfect being and not necessarily to ourselves. But those kinds of spiritual safety nets, so to speak, comes with time.
Have you ever seen yourself arrogant?
Oh, yes. Yes. I remember once, during the time of the fall of the Nation of Islam, and I was in a
We're talking about now?
1976, 75, 76, 77, before I thought to rebuild the work of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. I happened to be in my home here in Chicago, and my son was playing one of my tapes from an earlier speech in the mosque when I was the minister in New York. And as I heard my words, I shouted up to my son, and to be very honest, I said, "Turn that nigger off. He's just too damn arrogant.
Mm.
And, you know, one does not see oneself.
Mhm.
It says the eye beholds everything
Mhm.
except itself.
Mhm.
And so sometime during that period
Mhm.
when Elijah Muhammad was not here
Mhm.
and I was not in this great position that I was in New York, and I was down,
Mhm.
at that time God allowed me to see myself and to learn the value of humility.
Mhm. Mhm.
And when I heard myself and saw myself,
Mhm.
I knew then that part of my preaching was for God and part of it was vanity.
Mhm.
And either I was going to be all for God
Mhm.
or all for vanity.
Mhm.
And one has to purify oneself from these kinds of traits or characteristics in order to really be effective in transforming human life.
Mhm.
And your own life
Mhm.
has to be the example of that. And one can't do that if we are not brutally honest
Mhm.
with ourselves.
Mhm. This period that you're talking about, you said it was, you were listening, it was around in the 70s when the Nation of Islam was falling apart, and you were listening to this speech that you made that was around the same period.
No,
No, it was your
it was
speech.
earlier
Okay.
when Elijah Muhammad was here
Oh, I
and the
see.
nation was in full bloom,
Okay.
and I
You were
was the
aware of that
premier
time.
minister
Oh,
in New York,
okay,
and
okay. Uh-huh.
and commanded tens of
I
thousands of
see.
people,
Uh-huh.
but I didn't see myself.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Do you feel do you see arrogance now?
No.
Do you ever? Yeah.
No.
Mm-hmm.
I see the passion
Mm-hmm.
for the truth,
Mm-hmm.
and I see the passion for the liberation of our people.
Mm-hmm.
But I know my
Mhm.
own
Mm-hmm.
limitations,
Mm-hmm.
and I know that it is not I, but it is God,
Mm-hmm.
and I must lean on Him and trust in Him
Mm-hmm.
and completely surrender to Him in order to get through
Mm-hmm.
the difficulty that the word that I speak
Mm-hmm.
has put me in.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Now, um, is there one single? What is the single biggest distortion that the, the larger media, the larger public? I mean, what is the biggest distortion
I
that they
think,
think they have? They
well,
have about
the
you?
thing that has caused my own brothers and sisters to fear me
Mm-hmm.
and to, sweetheart, Betsy, you wanted to see me? Oh,
Mm-hmm.
this
Is
is
this
my
your
wife.
wife?
Yes.
Oh, hello. How are you?
This is your first name?
Diane Weathers. I'm an
Sister
editor at
Diane
Essence.
from Essence magazine.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. Nice meeting you.
Um, where
We're
was it?
talking about the distortion, the single biggest
Yeah. The
distortion.
thing that makes my own people
Mm-hmm.
afraid
Mm-hmm.
to embrace me
Mm-hmm.
or come, even to become friendly toward me, is the charge of anti-Semitism.
Mm-hmm.
Because most of our people are tied to members of the Jewish community in a very fundamental
Mm-hmm.
way
Mm-hmm.
that their own survival, economically, politically, organizationally, depends largely on having a good relationship with members of the Jewish community. And if they appear too friendly to me and I am given the name of anti-Semitic, then they have to distance themselves from me in order to survive. And that is the biggest distortion of all.
The distortion is that you are anti-Semitic?
No,
or
the distortion is that I am not.
okay, yes, okay, right, that you're not. Okay, that's what I mean. Yeah.
Yeah, I am not.
You are
But the
not.
distortion is that they say that I am.
am. Yes, right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Um, do you ever experience periods of self-doubt?
Yes.
That
Yes.
that maybe this is not right. Can you give me an example?
Well, the
This
Million
way.
Man March,
Mm-hmm.
let's go back.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, everybody
Mm-hmm.
who starts down a difficult road
Mm-hmm.
may entertain doubt until one's faith
Mm-hmm.
is made strong.
Mm-hmm.
And when I began the work of rebuilding the Nation of Islam, in the initial stages,
Mm-hmm.
I not only had some doubt, I had some fear
Mm-hmm.
as to whether I could,
Mm-hmm.
whether it would lead to the loss of my life,
Mm-hmm.
the effect it might have on my family.
Mm-hmm.
And these were doubts and fears that had to be overcome by faith. And as my faith grew,
Mm-hmm.
the doubt disappeared
Mm-hmm.
and the fear disappeared.
Mm-hmm.
When in 1986 I had a spiritual experience that allowed me to see that the government of the United States was about to bomb Libya and Muammar Gaddafi, I was on a world tour.
Mm-hmm.
And the president had issued an executive order that no American citizen should travel to or do business with Libya.
Mm-hmm.
And I had to make a decision
Mm-hmm.
as to whether I would go to Libya and warn Muammar Gaddafi of what God had shown me,
Mm-hmm.
or be obedient to the president's executive order.
Mm-hmm.
And there, in the time of decision making, you have doubts and maybe some trepidation. But when I made up my mind that I had to pursue the course that I felt was right, then I went.
Mm-hmm.
And whatever the consequences were, I was prepared to accept those consequences.
Mm-hmm.
And so with the Million Man March, I happened to see that black men are a target group.
Mm-hmm.
I see us as an endangered species.
Mm-hmm.
And I see the terrible image that has been projected of us and that we have cooperated in projecting, that made the world to see us
Mm-hmm.
as a people
Mm-hmm.
who maybe America would be better off
Mm-hmm.
without.
Mm-hmm.
And so I made a conscious effort to talk to black men.
Mm-hmm.
And I was advised by dear friends outside of the Muslim community not to do it because the government would think I was raising an army and it would bring great wrath down on me. But I thought about it, and I know that black men are suffering, and so I didn't care about what it would bring down on me. I had to pursue what I felt was right. So when you're embarking on a course that elevates the consciousness of your people, but at the same time angers certain elements in the society, you do have some fears and you do have some doubts, but faith always has helped me to overcome fear and doubt.
Mm-hmm.
So when I spoke Million Man, it came out of my mouth.
Mm-hmm.
I looked at it. I said, "Oh my God, what did I say there?"
Mm-hmm.
You know, I had
Set
no
yourself up.
exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm. Okay.
and at first, I called for 1,000,000 black men.
Mm-hmm.
Then I had to think, well, do you believe that 1 million black men
Mm-hmm.
are going to come.
Mm-hmm.
And at first I didn't quite know.
Mm-hmm.
But I had talked to over 150,000 black men personally,
Mm-hmm.
and tens of thousands more by radio and taped
Mm-hmm.
messages.
Mm-hmm.
So I felt there was a possibility.
Mm-hmm.
And then some came to me and said, Farrakhan, look, 1 million men is a pretty big number. Why don't you call it the 100,000 man march?
Mm-hmm.
And then they told me, well, you can't have it on a Monday. People are working. You got to have it on a weekend.
Mm-hmm.
And I was convinced I had to have it on a Monday. I made it as difficult as possible.
Mm-hmm.
But then God strengthened my faith.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then I could see it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, people of faith always look insane or out of the box, so to
Mm-hmm.
speak, to those who don't have faith.
Mm-hmm.
But faith allows you to envision what others can't see.
Mm-hmm.
And then faith allows you to work to bring that vision into reality. And then if God is with that, he helps it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I believe that God himself ordered it.
Mm-hmm.
And my faith and in the vision of it, I worked toward it, and we got others to work toward it, and God blessed it to become a reality.
Mm-hmm.
But yes, I have overcome fears and doubts. And I'll tell you another little story of fear.
Mm-hmm.
You know, one of the things that I love about being honest,
Mm-hmm.
it makes people who would tend to want to worship you see you like themselves.
Mm-hmm.
You can't be a good example for people if you're way up here
Mm-hmm.
and they are way down there.
Mm-hmm.
God elevates us all, if he chooses to, by degrees.
Mm-hmm.
And I am no better than the least one of my people.
Mm-hmm.
So if I can challenge my fears
Mm-hmm.
and my doubts
Mm-hmm.
and overcome them and show others how to challenge fear and
Mm-hmm.
doubt
Mm-hmm.
to overcome
Mm-hmm.
it,
Mm-hmm.
then I have been of service
Mm-hmm.
to my people.
Mm-hmm.
But if I lie and say, well, I don't have doubts and I don't have
Mm-hmm.
fears
Mm-hmm.
and I must project a certain
Yeah.
false image,
Mm-hmm.
then I'm not really
Mm-hmm.
a decent person or a good leader. Because if you're really a good leader, you want to make everybody else a leader
Mm-hmm.
so that they don't look to you. Look within themselves and look to
Mm-hmm.
God,
Mm-hmm.
because you're going to die.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you die, what will you leave behind? A bunch of weak, faithless people who put their trust in you as a personality rather than in principles that are eternal.
Mm-hmm.
So when you ask me questions that manifest my own weaknesses
Mm-hmm.
that I'm struggling to overcome,
Mm-hmm.
this is honest,
Mm-hmm.
you see. So I want to tell you
Mm-hmm.
this story. I was the great little minister in New York, taking the place of my idol, Malcolm X, and I had become exceedingly popular, and I was asked to speak at the John Jay College of Criminal Justice in New York. And I thought, what a great opportunity this is to talk to white and black law enforcement people. So I went and I crafted a subject that was rather safe. It was not, quote unquote, inflammatory, but it was sort of giving guidance, if you will, or counsel to white officials and officers who work with black people. But then in the question and answer period, a white officer stood up. He was like a detective. And he threw back his coat to show me this big gun that he had on his hip. And he said, is it true that Elijah Muhammad and you teach that white people are devils? And my heart started pounding.
Mm-hmm.
You know, would I deny what Elijah Muhammad and I teach because I'm in their group and they have their guns on their hips. So right then I was afraid. But I challenged my fear. And I said, yes, that is exactly what he teaches. And we believe. Now let me tell you why. And as I began to explain it, that man forgot that the gun was on his hip. He said, I understand. I understand. Oh, okay. In other words, I don't want to hear no more. So I challenged my fear. And when I challenged my fear, fear went into him of the truth, of their wickedness toward us as a people. Again, when the mosque was attacked in 1972 in New York, an altercation took place downstairs. I was up in my office giving a dictation to my secretary, and there was all of this noise downstairs, and I heard gunshots. And I told my secretary to stay in the office, that I was going downstairs. And the brother that was on the front door was running up the stairs, and he said, don't go down there, minister. They're shooting down there. And he ran past me, running for cover. And when I looked back, my secretary was coming down the stairs. And I literally turned her around and hit her and sent her back in her office. And I went down, challenging my fear of gunfire, and walked right in the midst of it. I'm saying that to say I am a natural man who has fears. But I know that anything that I fear other than God can destroy me. So whatever that fear is, I must challenge it even though I'm afraid. And as I challenge my fear, I lose my fear. And so I went to my teacher, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, and I told him about the incident at the John Jay College. And he was very interested, and his face got very stern. And he said, and what did you do, brother? Before I could even tell him. Then when I told him, he smiled. He said, the Holy Quran teaches that God will try you with something of fear, hunger, loss of life, loss of property, diminution of fruit. He said, but give good news to those who are patient and steadfast under trial. So to prepare myself for these things that God tries his servants with, fear, I challenge. Hunger, I fast. And I've fasted for 3 days, 5 days, 7 days, 11 days, 14 days, 40 days.
You fasted for 40 days?
Oh, yes. So you can't challenge me with hunger, because I challenge myself with that. Now, look at what I'm surrounded by. Can I stand to lose material things? You see, do I attach myself to material things so that I will sell my soul to keep material comfort? And I was poor, very, very poor as a young minister. And that woman that you saw there, my wife and I, when we were in Boston on Saturday night, we would go to the market. It's called Faneuil Market in Boston, and the market would throw the vegetables in the street in the night after they hadn't sold them all. They couldn't keep them, so they threw them in the street. And my wife and I would go with our shopping bag and pick the best of what was in the street, load up our little shopping bags, get on the subway, and come home just as happy because we could feed our little family for a whole week off of what we picked up in the street. My children used to wear clothes from the Salvation Army. My wife, we didn't have a lot of money. So I know what it's like to be poor, but yet rich in spirit. So I try, even though I have the best of things now, I try never to attach myself to anything that I cannot give up for God and for truth. Now, I believe that I will be able to withstand whatever they do against me that I feel is coming up in the next months or years.
What about fear and concern for your family? And, I mean, there are probably people who would like to kill you, like to assassinate you or attack your family.
Yes. Yes, I think about that. But in our prayers, we say every day, my prayers, my sacrifice, my life and my death are all for Allah, the Lord of the worlds. I cannot let fear of assassination of my wife or my children or my grandchildren stop me from a commitment to the liberation struggle of a people. We come from an entire people, and our life should be to serve those people out of which we come. So I tell my children, when they were babies, if you could question them, every time they had a bowl of soup, I told them, this soup comes from the poor. When I was able to put some clothing on their backs, this food, this clothing, this home that we live in comes from the charity of the poor. So when you go to school and get your education, you must work to advance the cause of the poor, because they've sacrificed that you could get an education, so you must use it to advance them. So all our lives, my wife, my children.
How many children do you have?
I have 9.
9.
And 26 grand. And 3 or 4 great grand. But all of us, we live and we die for the liberation of our people. So if they kill my children or kill me, they would not have done any more to me or them than they've done to others in the past.
We don't, the larger public outside of the people in your community and your inner family, we don't get to see your family much. I mean, we haven't. Is that like this purpose? Or?
Yes, I don't expose my family to the enemy. You know, I'm not satisfied that we are all friends. You know, I'm exposed. And that's my life. But I don't necessarily have to expose my family unless they wish that. I try to keep my wife and my daughters. They work within the nation, but I keep them away from limelight because I know what that brings. I'm born for that, but I don't put them in that unless they wish to be in that.
There's often a tendency of people, mostly men, but increasingly women, who have these really huge public lives, to neglect or become distant from the personal lives, the family life.
That's true.
It's a real
That's
it's
true.
a real challenge to maintain. Has that been a challenge for you too?
Yes, and that's why I admire Reverend Jackson so much. You know, when his son became a Congress person, I wrote him a letter telling him how much I really love, respect, and admire him and his wife, because they have done so well by their children. I think that may be a failing with me. I was told by Elijah Muhammad when I was a young minister. He asked me if I would commit myself to his mission. And he said, don't worry about your family. Allah will take care of them. And I took that very literal. And when then my dear wife would be up in the morning combing all my daughters' hair and preparing all of them for school. They all would wake up and they never saw their father laying in the bed. They always saw me at my desk studying the Quran or the Bible or lessons and assignment, and I taught 7 days a week. I gave audiences to those in the mosque that needed pastoral counseling and all of that. But I think I neglected my family. And there were times, when you don't think too much of yourself, then you don't think a lot of those that come from you. And that has been something in my life that I've had to overcome. I never thought a lot of myself. And sometimes when you don't think a lot of yourself, you usually put on an act that would make people think you're so self-confident, you're so this and you're so that. But it's a mask to cover some deep-seated inferiority. Not having a father, not having a male image. Even when I sang, I had an idol. Everybody has an idol. But I tried to absorb myself into Billy Eckstine because he was the one that was honored and loved and respected. And I guess in my heart of hearts, I wanted that same kind of admiration or adulation that I saw. And so if I could become Mr. B, maybe some of that would rub off on me. And then when I became a Muslim, my mentor was Malcolm. He was the first real great man in my life. And I found myself wanting to be Malcolm or be like Malcolm. And so my life was one imitation of one great person after another. But when you're like that, and you don't think much of yourselves, that is a weakness. And, the Bible said God makes his strength known through weakness. He manifests his strength through weakness. And that was a great weakness in me. And then when I got close to the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, I absorbed him. And it was only in this later time period here when the nation was gone and Elijah Muhammad was gone. And I became one who wrestled with myself and my own inadequacies as a human being, my own failures as a human being, and my inadequacies as a father and as a husband. And it was then that I began to see that there is real beauty in Louis Farrakhan if he would just be himself. So although I thank God for Billy Eckstine and what he meant in my life, and I thank God for Malcolm and Elijah Muhammad and what they mean and meant in my life, now I'm very happy to be me. But it took a long time for me to discover the beauty of me and why God did not want me to be Malcolm or Elijah Muhammad or anybody else. And the beauty that I discovered in my own evolution, if you will, or development, if you will, is that God never made two raindrops alike. He never made two snowflakes alike. He never made two leaves or blades of grass exactly alike. Each thing has its own uniqueness that manifests the magnificent wisdom of the Creator. So if God wanted me to be Elijah Muhammad, he would have given him a clone. If he wanted me to be B, he would have made me his clone. He made me me. And that's what I think Sammy Davis came to at a certain point in his life when he sang that song, I Want to Be Me. He was trying to be white folk. He was trying to be this one. And most of us are trying to be somebody else because we always have looked askance at self for some reason. Maybe we weren't as handsome as we thought we could be, as beautiful as we thought we could be, as light as we should be, our hair not what we... So we always admired this one and wished we could have had that and could have had this. No, at some point you have to stop and appreciate the wisdom of God for making you exactly as he made you. So now, in my evolution, I've found great love for God more so than I ever had, and great love for me more so than I ever had. Now I can love you as I love myself and appreciate everybody for who and what they are, not for what somebody wants to make them, you know. And so I realize that God has no cookie cutter and cut out all human beings to be the carbon copy of this. So if you say, I'm going to be like Jesus, or I'm going to be like Moses, or I'm going to be like Muhammad, what does that mean? You can't be like him genetically, but you can be like him in character. And that's what we should strive for.
Coming to this point has brought you closer to your family.
Oh, yes. Yes. I mean, I cannot undo what I have failed to do, or what I have done, or the things that I have done wrongly. But I have led my children to the path of God. And once you find God, then that eliminates the excuses of the failures of earnest parents who didn't do all that they should or all that they could. But now when you are with the perfect being, then all excuses of the past are over, because you can remake yourself once you and God find oneness. And that's the only healing balm for my own sense of failure, is that I have led my children to the path of God. And if they find oneness with God, then they can remake themselves in his image and is in his likeness, as we all were intended to be.
Are they all members of the nation?
Yes, everyone. And now all are striving in some way to be helpful to me in my mission, although I have some that are one that is trying to overcome a horrible problem of drugs, and all of my children have certain problems, as I guess all family members do, that they're trying to overcome. And being the son of Louis Farrakhan, who has this image, you see. But what I'm sharing with you and through you, our readers, is the reality that goes beyond image. The press can make an image of me as a very ugly, hateful, venomous human being. And on the other side, you can see this very strong and committed individual, and you can't fasten on to my weaknesses and become strong. But if I overcome my weaknesses and help you to face yours by my willingness to face mine, and to be brutally honest with myself, that you and others may be brutally honest with yourself, because there is no one that can hold you back from the promise of God for you but you. And so when you realize that you can be your best friend or your worst enemy, then you stop blaming others and you start getting your own foot out of your own way to make progress.
In talking about brutal honesty, is there any mistakes, decisions that maybe if looking back, you would have done differently, things you would have done differently. Um, I mean, I'm sure that happens. I mean, you look back on something. If I knew then what I know now, I might have done it differently. Can you look back on
Oh,
anything recently?
there are a lot of things that one could do better.
Mm-hmm.
For instance, in our lessons,
Mm-hmm.
we have that Elijah Muhammad gave us, we have a phrase that is referring to the Christian misuse of religion
Mm-hmm.
and misuse of the name of Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
And in the lesson it says, and they use his good name to shield their dirty religion. This is referring to white Christians using the name of Jesus as a cover for the way they mistaught and mistreated black people under the banner of the cross and Christianity. So applying that language to Israel, when I said Israel cannot find any peace and hasn't had any peace, because there can be no peace structured on lying, injustice, and murder, and using God's name to shield their dirty religion. And unfortunately, those words were distilled to mean that Louis Farrakhan called Judaism a dirty or gutter religion. And because of that statement and the political context in which it was made, that statement has stuck with me in every article that they write of Farrakhan. They always say, Farrakhan, the man who called Judaism a gutter religion and Hitler a great man. When in reality I never meant the religion as such, but the practice of injustice and lying and murder in the name of your religion.
So maybe you should have made that a little clearer.
Well, I did. Yeah. I did make it clearer after the fact, but unfortunately, the writers who were Jewish wanted to hold me in that anti-Semitic frame, because then they could use me to raise money. They could battle me, and it would look like, and it has been a battle between them and myself. And I haven't given an inch, and I don't intend to if I tell the truth. However, that could have been said much better.
And Hitler a great man as well?
I mean Hitler was a great man. He was great. He was absolutely a great man. And his greatness makes him a figure that you talk about nearly 50 years after his death. He's still a significant figure in the political history and the military history of the world. But greatness is not synonymous with goodness. And I said that Hitler was great, but he was wickedly great. That's what I said. And they put the word great and dropped the adverb that modified the adjective. They know what they're doing, and I knew exactly what I was saying. My language
I'm not Jewish, but I still couldn't quite get that sense. It caused some.
But I
didn't understand it.
But I'm saying my language was perfect.
Yeah.
Because if I wrote an article saying Hitler was indeed a great man, but wickedly great, then don't stop the sentence and say Hitler was a great man and leave out the qualifier. Then your motive shines through in what you left out of what I said. You understand? So if you are victimized because you don't know me, you don't read the final call, you don't hear my tapes, but you read Newsweek, you read Time, you read the New York Times, you read the Washington Post or the Daily News or the New York Post. So they have an ulterior motive. I'm going right back to your first question to me. out of their fear of the truth that is in my mouth. They have to make you see me in a negative light so that you won't come near me. Look how long it's been since they've written anything on me, in essence. It's been a long time. Since Marsha Gillespie.
Really?
Yes.
We always talk about you.
Yeah, in the office. In the office.
But I mean, just in terms of doing something.
No, but
well,
reality.
That, yeah,
See, here's reality.
Yeah,
Look, the man is too hot.
Yeah.
Look at our advertisers. So you have to limit me even in what you talk about where I'm concerned, because this, you get no problem with that. You talk about my fears, you talk about my inadequacies. Well, anybody would love to read that. But you don't want to deal with my philosophy. You don't want to deal with what I teach, because then you would be educating your public in a way that they may not be educated. And then, of course, some advertiser would threaten to pull the ad. I mean, I'm not blind. I see. And you see. But, you got to position me in order to use me. And that's a fact. Because I'm too hot to handle otherwise. So you got to find a way to do right by me. So maybe since nobody talks about his fears, nobody talks about any failures or doubts that he may have, he's looked upon as the black Superman. Well, even Superman had vulnerability if the enemy knew what it was to use. But any weakness that I have, nobody can use it against me, because God has made me aware and covers me. So I don't mind being honest with you, because there ain't nothing you can do to hurt me with what I say or what I do, by the grace of God.
But I think you're misinterpreting.
No, I'm not. No, I'm not.
May I tell you?
No, I'm not.
It was really Susan's idea that everyone sees the criticism, everyone sees the images of you scowling, usually scowling, never smiling.
And that's beautiful, but that makes me acceptable. Don't you see? This thing,
we
that
wanted
you
to see
doing,
the other side.
Yes, I understand.
Yeah.
But that's the only side that you can justify. Because if you really print the things that make me scowl, it's going to hurt. It's going to hurt, because I'm never going to back down from the truth of what I believe, Diane. And that too, if you're not able to handle that, you can't put that in no black publication without risking loss from your advertisers. That's why it's taken so long for Ebony to even include me in the 100 influential people. You don't write stories about me in Ebony. There are many things that I've done that deserve to be written about. Why can't you write? Because fear of what the advertising dollars will do. I understand all of that. But this is a lovely way to get Farrakhan in the edition and position me in a way where I'm really not threatening. And that's fine with me, but I see it. I mean, I know Susan loves me, and she would like to be able to help me and give people a better view of Farrakhan. And what you have asked me, reporters don't ask me these questions, but I would be just as honest with them as I am with you, because I don't fear what my innards are. I don't fear you seeing me. Because to see me and to see how I work to overcome my own inadequacies will help people who really want to make themselves better. But I'm not blind to reality. Not at all. Not at all. Because the only way you could put me in essence is to put me in there like this.
I don't, if there's, quite honestly, if there's something, I said we're trying to get at the heart of the person in this, and we thought it would be a different way.
Well,
it's
you got my heart all right, but I mean, believe me, those issues about which, like they say, when you come to my house, they say, oh, he treats us so kind and lovely, but when he gets up in front of his audience, he says things that betray the kindness that we got at his table. When you're at my dinner table, I'm feeding you. You are my guest. When you ask me about my philosophy, when you ask me about the pain and suffering of my people because of your misdeeds, and that's what I'm teaching my people, then you're going to get that scowl. You're going to get that passion. That's the other side of Farrakhan. So you got to take the whole package. It's not just the sweet man. He is sweet. He's a beautiful human being, but he's dangerous too. Because there's another side to even God. As beneficent and kind as he is, he's the number one killer. Nobody has killed more than God. Name Hitler, Mussolini, Hirohito, Tojo, Genghis Khan, Kubla Khan. Name all the killers in history and then stack them up against God. And when God gets ready to wipe out those that he disapproves of, he wipes them out. He don't leave root nor branch. So God has another side to him. And the sad thing about it, they always portray God as this milquetoast, soft and sweet kind of God that's so forgiving. But there's a killer side to God. And that's the side that disciplines and enforces his will. And the people are not acquainted with that side of God. But soon they will know that side of God. And I would hope that we would learn God to the way that we should learn him, so we never have to see the enforcement side of God's law and God's will. I mean, this is aside from what you've asked, but this is Farrakhan.
This is
me.
Believe me, I didn't really necessarily want to talk about your good heart. I want to talk about your good heart, but I thought it was that was not my idea. That really, it was mine. This person, I said, it's black man is outlaw, and that's the archetype, and that is so many men out here. And how I wanted to hear from you, how that has come to be.
But why am I an outlaw? See, the black man is an outlaw because maybe he's given the image of selling drugs, of shooting indiscriminately, of being one who violates and disrespects law and violates women and is ignorant and savage. I am none of that.
Yeah, I'm not talking just about that kind of outlaw. The one who is challenging. It's been the writers. It's been.
But that's the point.
You know what I'm saying?
It's
been the challenging.
I am an outlaw, not because of outlaw characteristics.
That's what I'm saying.
I am an outlaw because I challenge being a slave.
Yeah.
That's what makes me an outlaw.
Yeah.
So the slave master who must force our intellectuals, our professionals, our basketball players, our entertainment figures to bow and sacrifice their manhood and their womanhood on the altar of a check. But I refuse that. So I'm an outlaw. But he spread a table before me in the midst of my enemies. I eat. I sleep. I have the best that all of those who bow down to white folk have. And I get mine, not from bowing down to them, but from bowing to God and standing up for what is right for my people. And that's the kind of example that, yes, I've sacrificed my family, I've sacrificed my children to see my people free. And if in the end, when my story is told, my children can say, that man, from the time they came into the world, they saw me as a teacher and a guide for our people. And although my children never saw me but once go out in the field and throw a ball, I never took time to throw a ball. I think I had a picnic with them once. I sat down with my children around a picnic basket and lollygagged. I never had time for that. I studied to become what I am today. I sacrificed to become who and what I am today, not for vanity, but for the liberation of our people. And this is the way I hope to end my life. And even if my family or children don't understand me, in death they will get to know me better than they knew me in life, because the physical thing is gone. Now you got to deal with the character of a man who refuses to lie, a man that refuses to steal, a man that refuses to lorate women. Yeah. Really a good man that is suffering because he's too good to believe that he's real.
I was going to ask this off the record, but now we can put
Now,
it on the
everything
record.
is on the record.
Yeah, we want to put, your trip to Africa, meeting with the people you met, it confused. I've heard some people say, well, they didn't understand it. I was, with Farrakhan until that trip.
What
was confused.
Well, let me ask a question. What confused them?
Mm-hmm. Meeting with the people that you did meet, people who are so oppressive to their own people.
Who?
Saddam and the Kurds, Saddam and the Shiite Muslims in the South.
Sister.
Sudan. The horrors they've been carrying on the people, the war they've been waging against their own people.
Oh, sister.
Am I getting it wrong?
No, when I ask why you're confused, because I went and spoke to people who have misused their own people, according to your words, and people who are such oppressive regimes. Huh? Tell me something. Which one of these Negroes that condemn me would not accept an invitation to the White House? Do you think the White House and the Congress have not been most oppressive to the aims and aspirations of our people in America, and the horrible foreign policies that come out of our government toward Africa, the Middle East, and other nations of this earth? But you wouldn't turn down an invitation to have dinner at the White House. Why? These are criminals in the White House. They've been criminals for years. They didn't say that about Truman. They would sit with Truman. Truman dropped a bomb on men, women, and children and disintegrated them. Huh? But we sit with our president because he did it against the Japanese. Huh? Which one of those that I sat with are guilty of the crimes that America is guilty of? Name one. Name one.
It's not the same. They're not the same.
Well, why isn't it?
No, I'm saying what Saddam Hussein did to the Kurds, it's what he did to the Kurds, what he did to the Sunni Muslims.
What America did.
But I'm saying they're two, I mean...
No. We're dealing with crime now. We're dealing with criminal
Does one
activity.
justify the other?
I'm not saying that.
Yeah.
I'm not...
I agree,
but I want you to hear me.
Yeah.
Hear me, please. What was the theme of the Million Man March?
Atonement.
Thank you. What does atonement mean? It means that somebody has done wrong, and they are not at one with God, not at one with righteous principle, and they must do something to make up for wrong. In that theme, look at us as a people. Here, name me any foreign leader that has done to us what white folk have done, but you can forgive them. Look at this. Here, Jesse can go down to Alabama and embrace Governor Wallace because he somewhat atoned. See? And we can tell our people that we shouldn't hate nobody because of the evil that they poured on us. And here you see the Jews running people down all over the world for what people have done to them. And in the spirit of atonement, I go.
Has Saddam
My
atoned?
God.
Has he atoned?
See, you know, sister, you all have a degree of ignorance. And I don't mean this disrespectfully.
No.
But you have a degree of ignorance that you see the effect, but you don't see cause. You see an effect over here, but the persons who created this, their hands are hidden. And those are the persons that you're hanging out with, that you make excuses for. Now let me show you something, the help of God. See, I'm not an apologist for Saddam Hussein. I don't know what he did to the Kurds or to Shiites.
I do.
You do?
I was there.
Thank you. Now, whatever any national leader does, they're going to have to pay for it. Now, did you know, sister, for instance, that who's that? Who? Oh. Did you know, sister, that when the British were in control of that area, and at the turn of the century when oil became the number one energy, whoever controlled oil would dictate the movement of the world. The British, when these nations got quote-unquote independence, began carving up those areas to create certain problems that would come up in the future. The British took the 19th province of Iraq and called it Kuwait. The British set up the sheikdoms. The British helped set up Saudi Arabia. Now what you have individual families becoming exceedingly wealthy from oil revenue. They're building great for their people as well. But this was established by the British. When a man named Mohammed Mossadegh was the leader in Iran, and he nationalized the oil, then the oil companies of America, England, decided that he should not be on the throne. So the CIA unseated Mossadegh, put the Shah on the throne so that they could have greater access to the oil at less expense. Thousands of people were killed, and the Shah ruled against the cause of Islam, but ruled for the West. So the West propped him up as the gendarme of that area. Now that gave rise to Imam Khomeini. Imam Khomeini comes to power. The Shah is unseated, but now Iran has all of this hardware, military hardware from America. And he threatens with a revolutionary brand of Islam that area. Okay? Prince Bandar told me that the Saudis gave Saddam $80 billion to make him a bulwark against Iran. So now you have Shiites in Iraq, Shiites in Iran. So here you have now somebody in a position of power feeling that there is a fifth column, so to speak, in his own house. Now, Imam Khomeini is inspiring Shiites throughout the world. Saddam happens to be Sunni, but there's a huge Shiite population in Iraq. I'm not justifying. I'm only citing what I see. Now, I hope you don't mind my indulging you
Oh
for
no,
these few minutes.
this is what interests me very much.
So now, from my vantage point,
Mm-hmm.
what America did for the sake of oil
Mm-hmm.
destabilized Iran,
Mm-hmm.
brought in somebody who was more Western than Islamic.
Mm-hmm.
So he ruled against, or set up that which militated against
Mm-hmm.
Islam, which created a longing to return to the pristine purity of faith, which gave rise to Imam Khomeini. Now, Imam Khomeini was in France, and he once lived in Iraq as well. And now he comes back a conquering hero, but he now hates America for what America did.
Mm-hmm.
Now,
Mm-hmm.
America is trying to hide her dirty hand,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
as if she did nothing. And these people jumped on her embassy
Mm-hmm.
and captured her people and held them hostage.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, now Saudi pays or gives Iraq $80 billion. I don't know this to be a fact. I'm getting this from the mouth of Prince Bandar.
Mm-hmm.
And they spend the money to become military powerful. Who gets the money? England, France, America, and maybe even Israel, Russia too. So 80 billion is spread among these munitions makers. Now Saddam is ready.
Mm-hmm.
So somebody and America is giving him weapons or selling him weapons,
Mm-hmm.
and he is motivated to attack Iran. Iran did not attack
Mm-hmm.
Saddam.
Mm-hmm.
Saddam now, the West is backing him.
Mm-hmm.
All of these nations were backing him in the Iraq-Iran war.
Mm-hmm.
Both Iraq and Iran lose trillions of dollars in property, but over 1 million Muslim lives.
Mm-hmm.
They fight to a stalemate.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But Iran is kind of decimated militarily because nobody is selling her the
Mm-hmm.
parts that
Mm-hmm.
would, so
Yeah.
forth and so on. Okay, so that leaves Iraq still with the Republican Guard and still,
Mm-hmm.
still somewhat powerful. Now they're dealing with the Kurds and they're dealing with the Shiites because Saddam feels that these are enemies within his house while he's trying to prosecute a war with Iran. Okay, so what he does to the Kurds, even using poison gas. Now, America knows this, but America don't say nothing because he is their dog.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
I know there's
sister.
enough dirty hands to go
Oh, okay.
around. You know, I.
My point,
Mm-hmm.
sister, is this. You know, did you know that the American ambassador sort of gave a signal to Iraq that sort of said, well, that's your personal thing if you want to
Yeah.
settle that,
Yeah.
So
That was.
and then Margaret Thatcher comes over and talks with Bush somewhere in
Mm-hmm.
Colorado,
Mm-hmm.
and Bush then tells Saddam Hussein, you got to get out
Mm-hmm.
after Saddam has gone in. Well, they have a psychological. Sister,
Uh-huh.
yeah, well, my next appointment is here. Yeah, well, we might have to put it back some. He'll be there for the afternoon, right? Do I have anything this afternoon? Okay. Okay, well, why don't we tell the doctor that I won't make it at 12 and maybe to put it back to 2. Thank you. Go ahead,
The
sister.
reason, yeah, I've always been a writer and a journalist, and for 6 years I was working for a relief program, uh, World Food Program. They deliver emergency food assistance. So that's how I came to be in Iraq after the war, and I went to the south, and then I went to where the Kurds were. I was in Chad, which was invaded by Libya. I was in the part that was invaded by Libya. We were also providing food assistance for them. I mean, it was I saw a culture just, they have nothing in Chad but sand, and I just saw uh, a culture destroyed. It's a very exotic, very they had the old elders and they had caravans. They used to trade. The Chadians used to trade with Libya. And I went to the part that the Libyans occupied, and I just saw. I mean, Libya was, it's a great threat. I think Gaddafi is really a major threat to the people in that area. I was also working in southern Sudan for about 2 months. We were also delivering food assistance to people in the south, and the years of war, the unrelenting civil war has just displaced so many people, and
I
so
would
many
like
people
to
have
deal
died.
with that. I would like to
Yeah,
deal with
yeah,
that with you. You know, I'm going to just make a very
yeah,
quick
yeah.
statement. See, with Gaddafi, whatever he has done in Chad, I'm not familiar with that. But I know him to be a revolutionary that has financed the revolutionary struggle of many, many nations. I mean, groups in Africa that I saw on the right side of history.
Mm-hmm.
And because of this, he's greatly loved among most of the African nations.
Feared, I think, as well.
Well,
Tremendously feared.
well, I don't think he's feared more than they fear America. Now, maybe Chad might be afraid of him, but I really don't see that fear in other countries. But let's leave that for a moment. The Sudan. Have you ever had a chance to talk with John Garang?
No, we were down there, but we didn't talk. I mean, we weren't really supposed to talk to, we were just dealing with the local relief groups. I just brought some pictures here of Chad. The tanks, the Chadians drove the Libyans out, and in the desert, it's just amazing. There are all these the remains of the Libyans. This is the area that that Libya invaded. It's way to the north on the border. It's mostly sand. What they have a certain kind of mineral, and I think that was what they were trying to just take over this part of the land. This is a water tower that was just shot up and destroyed. Water is very precious there. That is some of the traditional culture. I mean, these are the,
It looked like the people that I saw in certain parts of Nigeria.
That's southern Sudan, and I wish I had more pictures. I had pictures of Iraq too.
Okay, please.
Yeah.
Let me just finish this,
Okay.
and then maybe you can have.
Mm-hmm.
Now, my sister, listen. I've seen Sudan under Numeri.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen the Sudan under General Swardaha, whose coup overthrew Numeri.
Mm-hmm.
I visited the Sudan, and I spoke to Sadiq al-Mahdi, who later, in an election, became the leader of the Sudan. There was a problem in all of these times with the South. There was fighting under Numeri, under Swaradaha, under Sadiq al-Mahdi.
Yeah.
Okay?
30 years. I think.
Exactly. So, now what is not known, because I never chose to make it public until recently, I had a long conversation with Sadiq al-Mahdi and Dr. Hassan Tarabi, and Sadiq told me that he would be the next leader, in which he was. He did eventually become. And then he told me that he would resolve the problem in the South, which he was not able to do. Omar Bashir, in a coup, overthrew Sadiq al-Mahdi. Hassan Tarabi became the spiritual leader, so to speak, of the Muslims in the Sudan. 2.5 years ago, I was asked if I would help with the problem with the South. And I left the United States and went to Ghana, met with President Rawlings, and he called Dr. Kenneth Kaunda, who was then out of power as president in Zambia. And he said that he would assist me. So I flew from there to Nairobi and met with Dr. Kaunda, where we discussed the problem of the North and the South. I met with President Moi, who was the head of a group of nations that were trying to resolve the problem. And I got Moi's perspective. Now, this is from Rawlings, Dr. Kaunda, President Moi. I never heard one time the mention of slavery as the reason for war. I went from there to Uganda, and I talked with President Museveni for nearly 3 hours. And I met with John Garang and his wife and some of his lieutenants for 4.5 hours. And John Garang is the leader of the opposition to the regime in the North. He never once mentioned slavery.
I never heard slavery.
Okay, that's my point.
Yeah.
Now, there is a long history of injustice. Now, what I perceive is that Arabism, not Islam, but when the Arabs brought Islam, they brought Arab culture. And Arab culture, like white Christians making us black Christians, they impose upon us their way, their value system, which may or may not be Islamic. And so if I'm speaking Arabic and I'm mixed with Arab blood, you or me, we would be like the people of the North, but we're black. And there are people of the North darker than my brother there that are Muslims, but they have an Arab mentality. And that mentality that is imposed by the Arabs makes them to feel that they are better than the black brothers in the South who happen to be animist and Christian. And it's the same old poison that we have fought in Washington, D.C. If you're a lighter, you could get here. So I'm saying there are things there that I tried to educate the North that they're not even aware of the hurt that they have caused the people in the South for them to fight a war against them for so many years. And I said the thing that will solve this problem is justice. Well, Garang and them want to secede. Well, they don't want the South to secede because that's oil rich. And to take the South away from the North is to take the economic strength of the Sudan away. So they're fighting like the North here fought against the South because the economic thing at that time was slavery. So people who fight for economic and political reasons, they can justify why they go to war. It's the same thing happened in Nigeria when the eastern region called Biafra wanted to get out the oil-rich region. That would have crippled Nigeria as a nation. So they see these things as beneficial to the West, but not beneficial to themselves. So I'm saying that to come to this point. Atonement is for every sinner. And all have fallen short of the glory of God. When I spoke to Gaddafi, I spoke on atonement. I spoke on what Gaddafi could do in Africa to change the image that he has. I spoke to Iran about this war and the weaknesses to allow the enemy to put Muslims against each other for atonement. I spoke to Saddam on that same wise and spoke to Syria the same, because Saddam has not spoken to Syria in a long time, and you know the conflict between all of them are Muslims. We talked about reconciliation. we talked about atonement. Not only reconciliation with those neighbors, but reconciliation with Saudi Arabia, reconciliation with the Gulf, and reconciliation with America. Okay, I visited 18 countries and spoke to 15 or 16 heads of state and government. They chose to only mention those 5 with whom America has problems. Sudan, Nigeria, Iran, Iraq, Libya, maybe Syria is thrown in that mix as harboring terrorists. See? But, sister, there's a root to terrorism. And the root to terrorism is the injustice that has been heaped upon the Palestinian people, and since Jewish people have been in absolute control of many of the so-called courts where you get justice, the Palestinians don't have no voice. So the only way they make themselves heard is by these depraved acts.
I was there too.
So, my sister, there's 2 sides, what I'm saying, to this horrible story of war and shame and bloodshed. And this is why we have called for a World Day of Atonement to atone.
A World Day?
A World Day of Atonement to atone for the slaughter of human beings whose lives in the eyes of the Creator are sacred. And that's what the whole thing was. I went to see Mobutu.
He definitely needs to atone.
Exactly. I mean, I don't know nobody who doesn't. Some need to atone more than others. But my point is, America sends people to these same areas, and nobody says nothing. When Reagan called Russia the evil empire, Billy Graham went there and preached. Nobody said, Billy Graham, you're cavorting with thugs. But that's a fear that white folk have, that we're going to join on to an enemy of America and do evil against our nation. And that's, I believe, what motivated their strong condemnation. But if my own people had a chance to question me about why I did what I did, then maybe they wouldn't be confused. But if you read in the media, Farrakhan said that the Muslims are going to destroy America. Well, what kind of insanity is that? I never said no such thing. Gaddafi promised to use the wealth of Libya to back the Nation of Islam. I sure would appreciate it if he would, and I would accept it with no strings attached. But so why
have
would
you gotten
that?
Any support from
Not yet.
them?
No. But we have to clear the road for that, because naturally, because of the executive order of President Reagan that is enforced by Clinton, there has to be some blocks in the road that are cleared. But anyway, I'm saying that to say there is enough blame to go around, and America cannot hide her bloody hands in the international suffering of the world's people. And so if I can go and sit with them, and if I were invited to the White House tomorrow, I wouldn't say to Clinton, I can't come and sit with you. He's the head of our nation. And perhaps I could say something to him that might be beneficial. That's why you go and talk to people in positions of power that make mistakes in judgment that cause terrible loss of human life. And perhaps if persons that are spiritual became more involved in talking with the boogeymen of the world, maybe we might make something better than what we have. And that was my purpose for going, and to see the effect of embargoes on these nations. That was my purpose. Anyway,
I'm
my
glad
sister.
I asked and got it on the record. I was gonna ask you after this. Because I said we said that this is what we talk about. we set up our
But I
limits
didn't.
and
I don't
boundaries.
go as a political leader
Mhm.
because I don't see myself as that.
Mhm.
I go as a spiritual
Mhm.
man to represent atonement, reconciliation, and accepting of responsibility for our actions. And what you asked of me in the early part of this deals with my own acceptance of responsibility.
Mhm.
See? And so when you get people to accept responsibility for their actions, then if they see themselves as guilty, they can repent.
Mhm.
And that's the beauty of the man called Jesus. He offers everybody a way out.
Mhm.
And I think I represent that great being. And since we all want to get out of what our own hands have done,
Mhm.
what is wrong with the minister offering not only to his own suffering people a way out, but to offer to African leaders and Arab leaders in their infancy of government and their many errors and mistakes,
Mhm.
a way of atonement and reconciliation.
When will be this day of the
Same,
atonement?
October 16th.
October 16th of this year.
Yes.
Oh, okay. I didn't know.
We're gonna
And what is it gonna feel like and look like?
Well, God willing, we hope that this year, instead of a march
Mhm.
on Washington, the thing that was not focused on by media the last time around was the day of absence, where many people who couldn't come to Washington
Mhm.
took the day off from work and
Mhm.
play
Mhm.
and spending money
Mhm.
to begin to fast and pray and reconcile differences within the family and within churches and community. And we hope that this year we will focus on the day of absence, where we just will focus on atonement, reconciliation, and continue that process. I might make a speech that day, I don't know,
Mhm.
but I would much rather us now think seriously about what atonement means. It's
Mhm.
not a one-shot deal.
Mhm.
It's something that will take place every year,
Mhm.
every year,
Mhm.
as it is in the Jewish calendar.
Mhm. Well, I have to thank you for pushing this discussion so that we could get to a little harder stuff. I really do. It was.
Well,
I didn't
maybe
feel
you
comfortable.
won't be able in the context of this
Yeah.
article
Yeah.
to use it, but
Well, we can get some of your concern. I mean,
my real concern is peace.
Mhm.
And if we can bring peace between the North and the South
Mhm.
and stop the carnage,
Mhm.
then we've done something
Mhm.
that is good. If we can make people, governments,
Mhm.
rulers to know their sins
Mhm.
and to atone for them.
Mhm.
If I may close this by saying this, you know, my dear sister, there is no government on this earth, not one, that God is pleased with.
I agree with you.
And so, when we say we believe in Jesus, when he returns, if we believe in his
Mhm.
return,
Mhm.
he comes to establish the kingdom of God
Mhm.
on earth. That is a government under the rules and laws of God. And when he comes, according to what the prophets predicted, he's not going to set down just one government. He's setting them all down because they all have failed miserably to satisfy the needs of the human community. So God has come to take over the rule. So now if I cast my lot
Mhm.
with any of these temporal rulers, I will make a grave mistake.
Mhm.
I cast my lot with God
Mhm.
and his Christ. But I think as long as these rulers are in power, then there is a chance that they can atone and that they can repent and do better by themselves and their people and their neighbors. And isn't that what most of those in the civil rights movement have fought and sat down with government leaders all about? It's not about holding their foot to the fire for yesterday's misdeeds, but seeking their recognition of the misdeeds of yesterday. And if they would feel sorry and repent and then do something in expiation for their sins that would promote the cause of justice. And that's why you don't fault Jesse for going to sit with the former governor of Alabama, because every human being deserves a chance to repent. And I believe that white folks deserve a chance to repent. And if they do with what they have done all over the earth, certainly Abacha does, and Mobutu, and Gaddafi, and Saddam, and Clinton, and Reagan, and Bush. They are living people who did some things in their life that when the truth were, if the truth were made known, people would say, not my president. But, I'm reading now about some clergymen who are fasting, have fasted for 94 days to release 300 computers that were earmarked for Cuba that was taken by the Treasury Department. And these people feel that America's foreign policy toward Cuba is insane. And it is. And they're being denied humanitarian things, medical assistance. This is wrong. And it's happened in Iran, in Iraq, and it should not be. And so, our voice, in conclusion, in my own view of myself, has to be a voice that cries out to the leaders, to those in power, the kings, the rulers, to make them to know their sins. Because when rulers make errors and mistakes, the little people are affected drastically by the decisions that those of us in positions of leadership make. And so I will close with my last fear, and that is of making errors and mistakes that could cost the loss of life of tens of thousands of people who look to me for guidance. And so as one evolves, one has to develop an ever-widening circle of counselors.
May I use the word I in that? When I write this, may I use the word I? Okay. Okay.
An ever-widening circle of advisors and counselors, persons who are not benefited directly by your position of influence over maybe how funds are spent, but persons who genuinely will critically appraise what you do. All criticism is not necessarily worthy of adhering to. And let me close with a picture. If you look at Abraham in the Bible, he was an old man, and God gave him news of a son. And he doubted that he could have a son with his age, and his wife Sarah was barren, but he did have a son through Hagar. And the Quran calls him Ishmael. The Bible refers to him as Isaac. But then God commanded him to take that son up on a mountain and sacrifice him. To the onlooker, the man looked too good. He didn't look too good when he went into Hagar. And he didn't look too good when he banished Hagar from his household and she was in the wilderness running looking for food. And he looked absolutely insane to take his son up on the mountain to drive a dagger into his son because God told him so. Now, you didn't hear God talk to him. I didn't hear God. And his contemporaries didn't hear him, but the boy looked pretty terrible. But God stayed his hand. The son was willing to be sacrificed. The father was willing to sacrifice, showing their tremendous love for God as a sign of Jesus, who would sacrifice his life and be willing to sacrifice, and God willing to sacrifice him for us. Well, when someone is going to be used as a sign for some great event down the road, well, we're not far-seeing. Contemporaries are not far-seeing. So we tend to be very critical, very judgmental of the moment. And we may say this is a horrible thing, this is an awful thing, but down the road it may turn out to be a very beneficial thing, but we didn't have comprehensive knowledge enough to make a definitive judgment that was proper. I say that to say, if you look all the way through the Bible, here's Noah. He's commanded to build an ark on dry land. He looks like a total nut. But when the flood came, everybody saw that boy just knew what we didn't know. So those who condemned him felt bad, and they died feeling bad because they couldn't get in the ark. The door had closed. And I'm saying that to say, as I said with this trip overseas, I really didn't hear God's voice speak to me. But I was inspired of the Spirit to get up and go and connect the nation of Islam to the Muslim world. Because I felt and feel that after the Million Man March, they were going to try to isolate me and the nation of Islam from the vast Muslim world and say that we're not true Muslims. So I had to go and make that connection. And I also had to make a connection in Africa because I felt that the Million Man March showed black men in a light that helped to destroy the image that media and our own degenerate cultural expressions have helped to foster of us in the world. And everywhere I went in the world, Sister Diane, every leader said, we watched the Million Man March. And the people with whom we spoke that saw it, their whole opinion of black men had changed in the twinkling of an eye. And so I saw myself as doing something that ultimately would secure the nation of Islam and black America and tie us in a very positive way to the struggle of black people all over the world, thus making it difficult to isolate us and then come down on us without world reaction. And I also did it to raise the price of murder. That I felt that after the Million Man March, I was in deep trouble. Yeah, and I am. The whole idea of separating the messenger from the message. And we like the message, but, the messenger is a messenger of hate and division and this kind of thing. Well, that is now an assault on the man. Now you're really afraid because an army showed up at his call. And they're an army with no guns today. But what will they be if that man maintains influence over them and we try to harm him? Then maybe we'll create a revolution in the house. So the Bible says they wanted to take Jesus, but they feared the people. So the next step was to separate Jesus from the people so that the people that said Hosanna in one day would say crucify him the next. And I just believe in the scripture, and I believe that every one of us who attempt to liberate following the footsteps of Jesus in one dimension or another, and I think I could safely predict what government would do, the hysteria of government and the hysteria of some Jews over the growing influence of this man that has become the anti-Semite. And then this article, this article, it humanizes me. I know the intention I know the intention of Susan. She knows a little more about me. And she knows the warmth of a human being that has touched her life and whose life she has touched. And she knows that I'm not this vicious anti-Semite. I don't hate Jewish people. I hate injustice. Whoever does it. But I'm in love with atonement. And even the whites have done us wrong, I don't think they should be left out of the atonement process because we have benefited, even though we've caught hell. Look at the position that we're in now. We grew up in the number one country on the earth in the last 6,000 years. We've had the benefit of the finest education that the world has to offer. We live in a house that we can influence its direction. And since this is the world leader, if we, through the proper use of our political and economic potential, can guide this nation to a proper course of justice, then we've saved America. And we've saved ourselves in the process. So I'm saying all of that to say every human being deserves a right to repent and atone. And that's where I am, and that's why I went. The major reason, and all the underpinnings I have given you. And I think that I'm going to face what I'm going to face. I know they're not going to prosecute me right now. But right now they've sent letters to the Justice Department, the Treasury Department, and they've threatened me with both civil and criminal charges, and they want answers to their query. But if you are seeking to indict me, then I don't want to help you to indict me. So we're right now in a legal struggle, but maybe I believe, and I could be wrong, I believe that the Jewish leaders have tremendous influence over Bob Dole and over Bill Clinton. And I believe, and I could be wrong, that both of them have agreed that the first order of business for whoever's elected internally is to deal with Farrakhan.
What issue is registering? You registering as a lobbyist or something?
I can't register as a foreign agent.
Well, you haven't gotten any money.
No,
even
if Gaddafi gave money, I still couldn't register as a foreign agent because I'm not that. I'm not here to promote Libya's cause. I'm here to promote the cause of truth and justice. And that principle is not a Libyan thing or an Iraqi thing, but it belongs to all of us. So I expect that if Clinton wins, they'll come out with something against me legally the first part of next year or next year. And I believe everything is in motion to bring that about. And the first thing they must do is to tie me to rogue nations. You see, he's cavorting with thugs and rogues.
Is there illegal something? I mean, your visit wasn't illegal.
Well, you could say it is illegal if you wish to use the executive order against it. You could make a case that I violated a law. I believe they could make a case. But they would have to show why they singled me out and not others who went to Iraq or went to Iran or went to Libya and still go to Libya and doing business with Libya. So that may not be the issue that they want to get me on. It might be something a little deeper. But whatever it is.
Someone said if you made a penny error on your tax return, you'd probably be in trouble.
You know, I there again, you know, somebody said to me, well, you know, they didn't get Capone on this, that, or the other, but they got him on income tax evasion. Well, you know, they have been investigating the nation for several years. We had to turn in all of our records of this, that, and the other, and many of the principals in the nation were subjected to that kind of scrutiny. They have never done that personally to me, but I'm sure that's part of maybe what's coming, you know.
Last question, I promise this, and it's going to be real quick. Finding solace. You know, I see the violins over here. Is this one of you? Is this some?
No, well, since the Muslims didn't know that I play the violin, when they learned my love for the violin, everybody had a violin to give me, you know. So I have violins everywhere.
I see.
You know, but, you know, the violin offers me solace. Yeah. And sometimes when I'm disturbed over anything, the violin does comfort me. But my greatest comfort is seeking refuge in God. And there is no violin, there is no female, there is nothing that can comfort me where I need comforting right now. And that comfort has to come from God, because only seeking refuge in Him can I find that realm of security, that sense of safety, where I'm not fearful of the arrow that flies by day or the one that comes by night, if I can feel that I'm shadowed under the wings of the Almighty. And so that is my striving today, to get as close to God as I possibly can, for only He can hide me, I believe, from what is coming. And I sincerely thank you from the depth of my heart for your questions. And I thank my sister Susan for framing me in a way that can show the readers of Essence another side of an enigma that white reporters could have easily asked questions like this. And I would have been just as straightforward with them as I am with you. Because what it does, it gives people a view of my own psychological makeup, faults, strengths, weaknesses that He's trying to turn into strengths. And, you know, where people have to sift you for these things, when you openly say them, then people look more deeply into the human equation, because in reality, that's where the man sinks or swims. Not in his image, but in the reality of who he or she really is. So I thank you for bringing that out. And I hope that the words that I spoke of how this interview is being framed was not offensive. I didn't mean it to be offensive, but I know that in reality, since it's not Time Magazine, and it's not Newsweek, and it's not U.S. News, there there's certain things that if you look like you're favoring this man, you could get hurt. So to talk about the weaknesses of a person or the human side of him, which is the side where he's vulnerable, see, then, what is the first law of warfare? Is to know your enemy. And so by providing my friends, but also my enemies, with an insight into my shortcomings or failures, they might seize upon this to use this to my disadvantage. You see, but as I said before, I don't think there's anything that anyone can do to harm me if I don't do that which harms me. And sometimes to open yourself up in the manner that I have could give someone who is ill-intentioned something to hurt him with. So that puts a burden now back on you as to how you handle what you were given, because there's a lot there.
A lot here, yeah.
Okay? Thank you so much.
Well, thank you for all the time. And after 20-some years, it's nice to finally meet you in person. I first saw
20 years?
I saw you at it was the Black United Front. They had a convention, I think in Atlanta. And you gave a speech, and you had a metaphor about an alarm clock, which I've tried to use in a novel. I mean, you were saying, wake up. We were on our feet. I mean, tears were rolling down my eyes.
I remember it.
Very middle-class people. And you called us all sorts of names. So I said, hey, we'll call us all sorts of names. And calling you handkerchief heads, you've sold out to the system, you're this, you're that. Wake up, Negroes, the alarm clock is ringing, but you're sleeping. It was incredible.
You know what? And I remember that speech.
Incredible.
It was in 79.
Okay.
78.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
It was in Atlanta, Georgia. And it was put on in a hotel. And I remember Maynard Jackson's wife was there, and the brother with the blackbirds.
Donald Byrd.
Donald Byrd was there. Yeah. And I remember that was like my first speech since trying to rebuild the work of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad in a setting with so many qualified black
mayors,
men and women. Exactly.
People in government.
And I remember when I walked through the aisle, coming out of there, the people were just reaching to touch their brother. And there were tears, but there was joy because it helped.
Because those were the 70s, which everything was Nixon, and it was just an awful period,
Were you around then, Brother Daniel?
Oh.
That was one of my first speeches in Atlanta. I could not afford to fly. We had to get in a car and drive there to make that speech. Oh, yes. I think it may have been 79. Not 78. Maybe it might have been July or June. It was in the summer months, wasn't it?
It was in summer. It was very hot. And he called folks every single thing. And he was right, because you felt then that people had sold out. It was sort of, everybody was trying to be a black capitalist, and that was the buzzword then, and make money and get ahead.
But sister, you all never called me anti-black because you knew that I spoke those words out of love.
Oh, yeah. No, we were.
For you.
People were applauding, it was like crying. It was incredible.
That's the same point.
Yeah.
With the Jewish people. None of us are free from critical analysis.
Yeah.
But when you critique somebody and they're so thin-skinned, they say, well, you're anti-Semitic because you offer critical analysis.
Yeah.
And of course I say it with sternness because it's a rebuke. And then you have to wear this horrible badge, but with my own which I have castigated worse not because I hate, but because I love. And these are things that need to be said.
Well, we understood that. And
That's
I
the
said
point.
I have my character. I don't know what I call him. Calling black people all sorts of things. And then he says something about Jewish people. And the next day in the paper was Minister whoever says this about Jewish people, forgetting everything else he said.
Because they're only concerned about how things affect them. And that's a very selfish thing about them that they have to correct as a people who have a covenant relationship with God. Otherwise, they will lose it.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you. And
God bless you, and please give my love to
I
Susan.
certainly will. I certainly will. Okay.
She told me that when it's done, they would send it.
Yeah, because these are your words. And
Okay.
it's you.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.